Dear friends, I hope this finds you well wherever you are at this moment in time, and I hope you're enjoying the book club so far. This week we have an opportunity to continue our journey together through the wonderful book One Buddha is Not Enough, and particularly giving attention to chapter 3, which is called No Mud, No Lotus, and is based on a Dhamma talk given by Brother Dhamma Source, Brother Phap Nguyen, back in Colorado during this retreat. When I was reading through the chapter and reflecting on it, there were a couple of impressions that really leapt out at me, a couple of themes that really made themselves known to me. The first is the notion of transmission from teacher to student, transmission from student to teacher, and the way that we're receiving and offering transmission in each and every moment. And the second is the nature of a teacher and student relationship. And also the reciprocal nature of such a relationship. One of the first things that struck me, though, was the poetic nature of this chapter. Are you a lover of poetry? I am. I really love poetry a lot. And that's kind of appropriate because Zen is filled with poetry. There are 4-line insight poems that are offered from student to teacher, and transmission gathas, transmission poems that are offered from teacher to student. Also, each lineage, in the northern tradition especially, has a transmission poem from which all of our Dhamma names are taken in order depending on the generation. Our poem is The Great Way of Reality, and it's contained on our ordination certificates. You'll see it's written here in Chinese, and then it's written here in English if we've received an English certificate, or in Vietnamese if we received a Vietnamese certificate. I might like to read this transmission gatha out because it really encapsulates the essence of the teaching of our lineage. It's a very old transmission poem. We consider these transmission gathas to be a heart teaching from the ancestors to us that encapsulate everything that a lineage is about. In every ordination ceremony in the Plum Village tradition, a novice ordination, a bhikshu ordination, a full ordination, an ordination for members of the Order of Interbeing, you will hear this transmission gatha being read at the conclusion of the ceremony. It's not only the precepts that are transmitted in an ordination ceremony, it is also in some sense the Dhamma body of the lineage that's being transmitted also. So we read this out since it's such an important encapsulation of the teachings. The great way of reality is our true nature's pure ocean. The source of mind penetrates everywhere. From the roots of virtue springs the practice of compassion. Precepts, concentration, and insight, the nature and function of all three are one. The fruit of transcendent wisdom can be realized by being wonderfully together. Maintain and transmit the wonderful principle in order to reveal the true teaching. For the realization of true emptiness to be possible, wisdom and action must go together. There is so much to unpack in this one transmission gatha, and perhaps I'll offer a series of talks, or maybe other brothers and sisters from Plum Village or lay Dhamma teachers will offer a series of talks on this transmission gatha. But for me, one of the most important lines of this transmission poem, and the one that's feeling like it wants to be spoken about today, is the very first line. The great way of reality. Here we're not talking about a small way, the kind of way that is all about the Holy Trinity that many of us dwell in, which is I, me, and my. The great way here is a way that includes all the different parts of ourselves, even the parts that we normally don't want to think about, or the parts that we think we need to cut off, or to hide, or to put down. The great way of reality includes all of that. It also includes everyone else and all living beings. We have a verse in the Discourse of the Eight Realizations of Great Beings saying that bodhisattvas suffer with all beings, practice with all beings, and transform themselves together with all beings. So that's the nature of the Mahayana path, to practice together with everybody and to exclude nobody. Nobody here, of course, meaning other beings, Mother Earth, and also parts of ourselves. I'm thinking very much about Mother Earth today. Today is the day that we have heard the news that our administration has decided that the United States will withdraw from the climate agreement. And so today I was looking at Tay's beautiful calligraphy that says, "I'm in love with Mother Earth." In our tradition, we see Mother Earth also as a great bodhisattva that nourishes and supports all life. So as I walk today, as I breathe today, I'm walking with steps of peace and love on Mother Earth, and breathing for Mother Earth, and very much aware of the impact of my own decisions and my own behavior, and also taking the opportunity to really decide to make choices, as small as they are, that will be impactful in terms of my own relationship with Mother Earth and nurturing her for many generations to come. This chapter, chapter 3, begins with another famous poem by the poet Robert Frost. It's the poem "The Road Less Traveled." When I read this poem, and all of us I think have read it or have heard it read many times, I'm always reminded of the fact that to see the path is one thing. To walk it is often quite another. And to open myself to the invitation of both the poet, in this case, or also the Buddha or our ancestral teachers, to not only see the path, but to take concrete steps on it, however the path presents itself to us and wherever we find ourselves in this moment. On the lighter side, whenever I come across this particular poem, I'm reminded of the episode of The Simpsons, I think way back in the 90s, where everybody's gathered in a lawyer's office, I believe, about to hear a video will. So they all sit around and the video will is played, and then the person who's passed away says, "And I'd like to begin my video will by reading a poem by Robert Frost," and she begins reading "The Road Less Traveled," and it starts off and everyone's listening, and suddenly Homer picks up the remote and he says to everyone, "Who's in favor of skipping the poem?" And then he starts to fast forward through the poem and everyone breathes a sigh of relief. I hope you didn't feel like that when you encountered this poem in this chapter. It's a very beautiful one. Often in poetry, like in the Dharma or like in a teacher-student relationship, it's often what's left unsaid which is as important or sometimes more important as what's said. Meditation is the same. It's a science of mind, sure, but at the same time, to be a meditator is also to be an artist. Meditation is an art as well as a science. How can we express ultimate reality, that which is beyond words and notions, with something as inherently limiting as words? We can only hint at the experience. There's a great teaching in the Zen tradition. It's a teaching story that's shared often. It's almost like an origin myth for the Zen tradition. The story goes that everyone gathered around for a discourse of the Buddha, and as they were sitting there, I imagine and I visualize eagerly awaiting this Dharma talk. By the way, back in the days of the Buddha, they didn't have the easy access to the Dharma that we have now. I often think of this when I'm giving a talk. I wonder how eager people are to hear the talk, or how often they just come because they're here and there's nothing else to do. In those days, I'm sure people were very eager to hear Dharma talks. And they're all sitting around and waiting for the Buddha to speak. And then the Buddha does something quite strange in this origin story. He lifts up a single flower and holds it. I imagine people looking and rolling their eyes a little bit and thinking this is weird, and waiting for something to happen, waiting for the Buddha to say something. But he remains silent, holding the flower. And then it says something very interesting in the origin story. It says Mahakasyapa was one of the senior disciples of the Buddha. Mahakasyapa smiles. In that moment, in the origin story, it's said that there's a heart-to-heart, a mind-to-mind transmission. This is really important because often we mistake this level of Dhamma understanding for intellectual knowledge. We read many books or hear many Dhamma talks, but we're not receiving a mind-to-mind, heart-to-heart transmission. This transmission takes place not only with words, but in each action, the way a teacher walks, the way that we lift our fork, the way that we look at each other, the way we smile. Transmission is not a one-time event. Even for those of us who have received a lamp transmission, a formal ceremony that a teacher's insight is formally passed on to the student or formally acknowledged to be passed on to the student. It's not a one-time event, it's not a ceremony, but transmission is occurring each and every moment, even or perhaps especially in the moments that seem absolutely ordinary or commonplace. Standing in the checkout line, waiting at a red light, or at the dentist's office. That's a good place for a transmission. That's a deep place, no pun intended. This is the choice that we can make each and every moment as we read in this chapter. Tay asks Brother Phap Nguyen, or by extension us, are you ready to step into the Pure Land? 1, 2, 3, let's go. With many things that are profound at the same time as being profound, there's a sense of playfulness and humor. There's a sense of lightness. As we meditate for a more extended period of time, we discover that being a serious practitioner doesn't mean we have to be solemn and tight and rigid, but rather we can engage playfully and with a lot of curiosity with our life. In this chapter, Chapter 3, we're also invited into considering how we concretely practice the two wings, the two aspects of Buddhist meditation, stopping and looking deeply, or to use their technical terms, shamatha and vipassana. Shamatha means to stop all of our running, both the physical running and the mental running, and to be able to rest our mind on one point. This is what Buddhist meditation in its initial stages is all about, to be able to rest our mind on and with one point, whether it's our breath or whether it's another object of our meditation. When we have developed the capacity to rest our mind on one point, when we've developed some initial concentration or samadhi, then what can manifest is vipassana or insight. Insight is the capacity to take that quietened mind to shine the penetrating light of concentration, of a stilled mind, on an object of meditation, so that we can understand a situation or an object of meditation more deeply. Vipassana, insight. Shamatha and vipassana are the two wings of the bird that is Buddhist meditation. We looked and explored these two aspects quite deeply when we went through our earlier book, The Sun, My Heart, so I won't discuss it too much further, except to say that it is important to understand how we can approach and practice with these two aspects of meditation each and every moment of our daily life. This week, as I was reading through this chapter and considering some of the themes that made themselves known to me, I came up with 3 reflection questions for us to journal with, to reflect on, to sit with, to walk with, or perhaps to discuss and consider in our sanghas. The first is around the theme of transmission. Is there a teaching or a practice that struck your heart when you first encountered it? The second question is related to that. How does that practice or that teaching continue to nourish and support you? And the third question is, have you found that the way you relate to it has changed and evolved over time? Well, I hope you've enjoyed and benefited from our sharing today. This program, along with so many other great programs, is made possible thanks to the Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation, and more especially thanks to your kind and generous support. If you find this and other teachings to be of benefit, I hope you'll consider a contribution through the Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation, and more information about the Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation and ways to contribute can be found at thichnhathanhfoundation.org. Have a wonderful week of practice.